The nurse who broke the rules. The rain had been falling in Tacoma since late afternoon, silver streaks shimmering under flickering streetlights as Lena Morris clocked out from another exhausting shift. Her body ached, her mind craved the quiet of her small apartment, and she was seconds from stepping into the downpour when the glass doors of St. Helena's clinic burst open. A police officer stumbled inside, cradling a bleeding German shepherd in his arms. The canine's hind leg was soaked in blood, leaving a crimson trail across the white tile. "Please help him," the officer begged, laying the dog on a gurney. Lena's eyes found the wound deep, jagged, bleeding fast. Animal treatment wasn't her jurisdiction, and hospital rules were clear. Injured service animals must be transferred to a vet immediately. But as she met the dog's pained gaze, she knew she couldn't turn him away. "Bring him into treatment too," she said. Under harsh fluorescent light, Lena worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound and stitching muscle and skin back together. Outside, the officers paced anxiously. One muttered, "They're not going to like this," but neither stopped her. When the final knot was tied, the canine let out a shuddering breath. His tail thumped faintly, a quiet thank you. Lena didn't know it yet, but that decision, acting against the rules in the name of compassion, would cost her everything. The next morning, the hospital director handed her a thin envelope. "Unauthorized treatment. Misuse of medical supplies. Effective immediately. You're terminated. No hearing. No chance to explain. Just a cold dismissal." She packed her few belongings in silence, walked out into the damp streets, and went home to a life that felt abruptly hollow. The following day, a firm knock pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened the door, the entire street was lined with patrol cars, and there he was, Max, the canine she'd saved, standing tall, bandaged leg gleaming white against dark fur. His handler stood beside him, but it was the precinct captain who stepped forward. "You didn't just save a dog," he said. "You saved one of us." On cue, every officer on the street raised their hands in salute. The drizzle fell silently as Lena stood in her doorway, tears blurring her vision. For the first time since being fired, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. By afternoon, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A shaky cell phone video of the salute had gone viral, flooding the internet with gratitude and outrage. Officer Daniels, Max's handler, called to tell her a fundraiser had been started in her name. She tried to refuse. He insisted it was too late. Within days, the total hit $400,000. A week later, the hospital called. The board had reconsidered and offered her job back, same pay, same benefits. She thought of the thin envelope sliding across the desk, of how quickly they discarded her. "No," she said simply, and hung up. Hours later, another call came. Dr. Samuel Pierce, director of Evergreen Medical Center. "What caught my attention wasn't the headlines," he told her. "It was the way you acted. Skill matters, but compassion is what makes a healer. I'd like to offer you a position, one where you can act in the best interest of your patients without fear of punishment." This offer felt different, real, respectful. She smiled for the first time in days. "I'll consider it," she said. Months later, sunlight streamed into Evergreen's glass atrium as Lena moved confidently through the hospital she now called home. Patients knew her by name. Colleagues trusted her judgment. Then she saw him, Max, walking beside Officer Daniels, strong, healthy, tail wagging. Lena crouched, rubbing behind his ears. "You look good," she whispered. The $400,000 raised in her name sat untouched in a foundation she'd created, the Max Foundation, to fund emergency treatment for injured service animals. Her life had changed completely. Not because of money or recognition, but because she'd refused to let fear stop her from doing what was right. That night in the rain had not been the end. It had been the beginning. If you enjoyed the story of Lena, Officer Daniels, and Max, the brave canine, share it with someone who believes compassion is worth the cost. 1 year later, spring sunlight warmed the steps outside Evergreen Medical Center. Lena locked her car and glanced at the small brass plaque by the entrance. The Max Foundation Wing for the care of service animals in crisis. It still felt surreal to see Max's name there in bold letters. The new wing had already treated over 40 injured canine South search and rescue dogs and therapy animals from across the state. Inside, Lena moved through the bright corridors with the same calm confidence she had the night she'd saved Max, only now she no longer had to break rules to follow her instincts. That afternoon, Officer Daniels arrived for a routine checkup with Max. The dog bounded toward Lena, tail wagging, his eyes holding the same trust they'd shared that rainy night. "You've spoiled him," Daniels teased. "I consider it payback," Lena smiled, scratching behind Max's ears. But peace didn't last long. One evening, Lena received a call from a small rural sheriff's department 2 hours away. A bomb detection canine named Rosie had been injured during the sweep of an abandoned warehouse. The nearest veterinary trauma center was closed for the night. Without hesitation, Lena and a small surgical team prepared the emergency bay. Rosie arrived, limp, her breathing shallow. The wound was severe, and the clock was against them. This time, though, Lena wasn't alone. A team she had trained stood ready, and the Max Foundation's mobile surgery unit was parked outside. Hours later, Rosie opened her eyes. Daniels, who had stayed to help, glanced at Lena. "Looks like Max isn't the only one you've saved." Now, weeks later, Rosie's handler sent a photo of her back on duty. A note attached. "Because you didn't wait for permission, she's alive. Thank you." Lena placed it on the bulletin board in her office, beside the first thank you card she'd ever received from Officer Daniels and Max. Looking out the window of her office one quiet evening, Lena realized something. That night in the rain had started with a single decision: to act. She'd lost a job. Yes, but she had gained a calling, and this time, she would never have to choose between rules and what was right. 2 years later, the Max Foundation had grown beyond anything Lena could have imagined. What started as a single hospital wing was now a network, mobile units across 3 states, a 24-hour hotline for first responders, and a scholarship program for veterinary nurses who specialized in service animal trauma care. On a bright Saturday morning, Evergreen Medical Center buzzed with energy. Today was the Foundation's annual Heroes Day, a gathering for every canine handler and rescue worker whose life had been touched by the program. Lena stood on the stage in a simple navy dress, speaking to a crowd of officers, firefighters, soldiers, and their families. At her side, Max sat proudly, wearing a small medal on his collar. "Every story here," Lena said into the microphone, "started with a moment where someone chose compassion over hesitation." She glanced toward the back, where Rosie, now fully recovered, was playfully nudging a young cadet. "This foundation doesn't just save animals," Lena continued. "It saves the bonds we share with them, bonds that can change everything." After the ceremony, Daniels approached her with a small velvet box. "It's from the precinct," he said, smiling. Inside was a silver pin, shaped like a paw print crossed with a stethoscope. "It's not an official medal," Daniels said quietly, "but in our eyes you're as much a hero as any of us." Lena blinked back tears, fastening the pin to her dress. That evening, when the last of the guests had left, Lena walked Max along the quiet hospital gardens. She thought of that rainy night years ago, the fear of losing her career, the uncertainty of what would come next. If she'd played it safe, none of this would exist. Max stopped, looking up at her as if to say, "See? Worth it." She laughed softly. "Yeah, buddy, worth it." And under the soft glow of the garden lights, Lena knew the story wasn't over. It never would be. Because as long as there were lives to save and rules that got in the way of doing what was right, she would be ready. 5 years later, the Max Foundation headquarters overlooked a stretch of green hills where retired service dogs lived out their days in peace. The air was filled with the distant sound of laughter, young veterinary students playing fetch with a half-dozen happy, gray-muzzled dogs. Lena, now in her early 40s, stood on the balcony of her office. Her hair carried a few silver strands, but her eyes held the same steady fire. She sipped her coffee, watching the sunrise spill across the kennels. Inside, the walls were lined with framed photographs, Max, Rosie, and dozens of other dogs who had been given a second chance. But in the center hung a new picture, a group of smiling young medics in fresh uniforms. That morning, Lena addressed a graduating class of veterinary nurses, the first entirely trained under the Foundation's scholarship program. "You're not here just to heal," she told them. "You're here to protect the bond between a handler and their partner. It's a bond you can't measure in charts or blood tests, but you'll see it in their eyes every time you save one of them." One student, a young woman named Noor, approached after the ceremony. "Ma'am, when I was 12, my dad's canine was saved by this foundation. That's why I became a nurse. I want you to know. We'll carry this forward." Lena smiled, feeling something shift inside her. The next chapter was ready to be written, and maybe it didn't need to be hers alone. That night, she walked through the retirement field where Max, older now, his steps slower but his spirit unbroken, lay under a tree. She sat beside him. The Max Foundation, simple 20-minute version. Lena stood on the balcony of the Max Foundation headquarters, looking out at the green hills. Retired service dogs played with veterinary students in the fields below. She felt proud seeing how far the foundation had come. Inside her office, the walls were covered with framed pictures of dogs and their handlers. Each photo had a small brass plate with their story. There was still one empty spot waiting for a new memory. That day was special. The largest group of veterinary nurses in the Foundation's history was graduating. Lena told them they weren't just there to treat injuries, but to protect the bond between dogs and their handlers. After the ceremony, a young woman named Noor approached her. Noor said her father's canine partner had been saved by the Foundation years ago, and that was why she had become a nurse. Lena was touched by her words. A few weeks later, the Foundation got an urgent call. A search and rescue dog named Atlas had gone missing in the mountains after a landslide while trying to save a trapped boy. The weather was bad and night was coming fast. Lena joined Noor and a small medical team and drove through heavy rain to the site. After hours of searching, Noor spotted Atlas under a leaning tree, shielding the boy with his own body. He was injured but alive. The team carefully lifted him onto a stretcher, and the boy followed closely, holding Atlas' fur. Back at the Foundation, Lena and Noor worked together to treat Atlas. When he woke up, the boy hugged him tightly. Later that night, Lena visited the garden where Max's memorial stood. She quietly told Max that they had brought another one home safely. In the months that followed, Noor began leading rescue missions herself. Atlas recovered fully and started helping train younger dogs. The Foundation grew, opening new branches, and held annual candlelight vigils to honor fallen service dogs. At the next graduation, Lena didn't speak, Noor did. Lena watched from the side, proud to see the next generation carrying the mission forward. She knew the work would continue long after she was gone, and that was the true meaning of a legacy. Continuation. After the graduation months passed, and the Foundation was busier than ever. Calls came in from all over the country, natural disasters, missing persons cases, and police canine injuries. The team worked day and night, but now they had more trained nurses than ever before. One afternoon, Noor brought Lena a letter. It was from the family of the boy Atlas had saved. They had moved to another city, but the boy had started volunteering at a local animal shelter because of Atlas' bravery. The letter thanked the Foundation for teaching us what loyalty looks like. Lena kept the letter on her desk. A year later, the foundation held its first National Service Dog Conference. Teams from across the country came to share techniques, tell rescue stories, and remember the dogs they had lost. Atlas was there, wearing a medal on his collar. He was older now, but still full of energy. During the final day of the conference, an unexpected alert came in. A collapsed building in another city had trapped several people, and local K9 units were requesting medical support. Without hesitation, Lena, Noor, and a team left immediately. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. Dust filled the air, and sirens echoed in the distance. Search dogs were already inside the rubble. One handler rushed over, carrying a limp black Labrador. Noor quickly checked. The dog had a broken leg and was struggling to breathe. She stabilized him while Lena directed others to set up a temporary medical area right there on the street. The operation went on through the night. By morning, every injured dog had been treated, and several people had been rescued thanks to the K9 teams. The local police chief shook Lena's hand, thanking her for bringing the extra support. Back at the foundation a week later, Lena stood again in front of the legacy wall. The empty space had been filled. A photo of Atlas with the boy he saved, both smiling. Underneath, the plate read, "For those who stand between danger and the ones who cannot protect themselves." Lena knew the wall would never be completely finished, and she liked it that way. There would always be more lives saved, more bonds formed, and more stories to tell. 2 years later, Noor had become the operations lead at the Max Foundation. She now oversaw training, field missions, and medical care. Lena had stepped back from daily management but still visited often. One morning, Noor received a call from a remote desert village. A sandstorm had buried several houses, and a search and rescue unit was on site, but their dogs were collapsing from exhaustion and dehydration. It was a rare and dangerous mission. Noor quickly gathered a mobile medical unit and headed out with a small team. The journey took hours through intense heat and shifting sand. When they arrived, the visibility was poor, but the sound of barking guided them. The first dog they reached was barely able to stand. Noor immediately administered fluids while another nurse checked its paws for injuries. Further into the site, they found a young German shepherd pinned under a collapsed wall. It took 3 rescuers to lift the debris. The dog whimpered but wagged its tail when freed. As the storm cleared, the team set up a shaded medical area and worked through the night. By morning, all the injured dogs were stable and every missing person had been found. The villagers thanked them with fresh water and food. When Noor returned to the foundation, she found Lena waiting with a smile. "I heard about the storm," Lena said. "Max would be proud." That evening, Noor walked past the legacy wall. There was space now for many new photos. She realized the wall wasn't just a history, it was a promise. The next week, she started a new program, the Max Junior Initiative, training teenagers from rural areas to become veterinary assistants. Her goal was to make sure every working dog, no matter how far from the city, had someone nearby who could help. Years later, people would remember that as the start of a new chapter, the moment the Foundation's mission reached beyond its walls and into communities everywhere. It was mid-January, and heavy snow had covered the northern mountains. The Max Foundation received a distress call from a mountain village. An avalanche had destroyed several homes, and 2 search dogs were missing. The local rescue team had already found signs of life under the snow but couldn't locate the dogs. Noor immediately gathered a cold weather response unit. They loaded sleds, thermal blankets, portable heaters, and medical supplies into a snowcat vehicle. Along with her went 3 senior veterinary nurses, including Samir, an expert in treating frostbite and working dogs. When they reached the site, the air was freezing and visibility was low. Rescue teams were using long poles to probe the snow. A villager pointed to an area where barking had been heard earlier. Noor and her team began digging carefully, using their hands near the last layer to avoid injuring the dog. After 20 minutes, they uncovered the first dog, a golden retriever. Named Shiro, his breathing was shallow and his fur was packed with ice. Samir immediately wrapped him in a thermal blanket and applied heated gel packs near his chest. The second dog, a Belgian Malinois named Kato, was harder to find. The avalanche had buried him under a collapsed wooden shed. The team worked for over an hour before they could lift the debris. Kato's leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and he was in pain but conscious. Noor stabilized the leg, gave him pain relief, and ordered immediate transport back to the mobile medical tent. By nightfall, both dogs were stabilized. The villagers insisted the team rest in their homes, but Noor and her nurses stayed in the tent to monitor the animals. In the morning, Shiro was eating, and Kato was able to sit up. When they returned to the foundation, both dogs received full rehabilitation care. Weeks later, they were back in the mountains, working alongside their handlers again. Noor updated the legacy wall with their photos and a caption, "Through snow and ice, loyalty survives."